Hi, everyone. It's Brad Weaber again, host of the 2022 Informs annual meeting. And thank you so much for joining me once again in our special series of Informs What's Your Story interviews, sharing a special and personal perspective of the plenary speakers at this year's annual meeting. I am beyond thrilled to be joined by Al Roth, the Craig and Susan McCaw Professor of Economics at Stanford University, George Goon Professor Emeritus of Economics and Business Administration at Harvard University, and winner of the 2012 Nobel Prize in Economics. So Al, I have to tell you, it's such an honor. I have had the privilege in my career to interview a lot of people, but let me tell you what, this is the first time I'm speaking with a Nobel Prize winner. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So to start off our conversation, how long have you been a member with Informs?
Well, I guess I've been a member of Informs since it began, because when I was a graduate student, there was TIMSS and ORSA. TIMSS was the Institute of Management Science, and I was a member of TIMSS. I think I just became a member of Informs by being grandfathered in.
Well, there you go. So when you look back and you start thinking about what initially attracted you, what attracted you to the field of OR, MS, and analytics?
Well, I liked math, and I liked thinking about how things interacted with each other. And I actually got introduced to OR when I was in college. I had a summer internship, a civil service position at an Army laboratory in Washington, and they had an OR group, and I was assigned to it. And when I came back to college, I was an OR major.
How has the OR field changed? I mean, you look back on your illustrious career. How has it changed?
Well, it's changed a lot, not monotonically and not always for the better. I think when I was young, I thought of OR as all the new kinds of mathematics that had been, applied mathematics that had been developed since World War II. And we were going to be the non-stuffy applied mathematics, always open to new things. Because the word applied mathematics had come to mean differential equations and things that were primarily used in those kinds of engineering. So I thought of OR as a very wide open field. I think it went through a period of narrowing down where, as a field, we let some things that had been OR, like game theory, go into economics, and we let other things like various kinds of algorithmic studies go into computer science, and the field somehow focused down on mathematical programming, for instance, and things like that. But it's opening up again. So market design, which grew up out of game theory into economics, is now, certainly we're seeing it at Stanford in the Management Science and Engineering department, where OR now is. We're seeing lots of OR students interested in things like that. So I think there was a time when OR looked very broad, and then it started to narrow a bit, and now it's looking broader again.
So let's talk about the winning of your 2012 Nobel Prize in Economics. Happy anniversary, by the way. And tell us about, I mean, this is so fascinating. Tell us about the celebration in Stockholm around it.
Oh, it's a giant party. It's a week of Super Bowl, but it's about science. So there's sort of wall-to-wall television coverage in Sweden. A TV camera followed me into the dressing room to try on my pants for the white tie and tails that you wear. And by the time I left, walking around Stockholm in my street clothes, people would recognize me by name. So it was overwhelming. It was fun. It's good to have been there, and it's good not to have that kind of focused attention all the time.
So you don't think you want to have a life of paparazzi, huh?
No, it's good to be anonymous. Anonymity is, I like to think that when I'm on my bike, I'm invisible. Nobody knows who I am or sees me, and it's good to be back to that situation.
What an honor, my gosh. So hey, can you explain market design in 60 seconds or less?
Well, start your watch. Market design might better be called marketplace design, because what we do is we try to build marketplaces that will help markets work well. And to work well, marketplaces have to help markets be thick. They have to attract enough participants so that you can transact in the marketplace. Think about Uber and Lyft. You need enough passengers and enough drivers so that you can quickly match them up when they need to be matched. You need to be able to deal with congestion when there are really lots of participants. You have to be able to sort through the possible matches quickly and effectively. And then you need to make the marketplace safe and trustworthy and reliable. And the meanings of those things have changed over time, and they keep evolving. Some kinds of safety are, you're going to pay with your credit card. You want to make sure that you're not going to be robbed later. Other kinds of safety have to do with not getting COVID from the driver and not giving them COVID. And increasingly, as markets are computer aided and algorithmic, we think about our data, about privacy and things like that. So market design is an ancient human activity. Markets are older than written history. But it's evolving rapidly, and market designers can help move it along.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, everything you just mentioned, I'm a big user of, the transportation and the algorithms, and, and talk about the whole COVID safety. I mean, when Uber started, they certainly weren't thinking about COVID, and it's just the evolution in that regard. So you mentioned earlier that you've been involved since the inception of Informs and for a few decades. So what keeps you coming back year after year to Informs?
Well, the problems haven't gone away. I mean, they change. We solve some problems, but we're never going to solve all the problems. It's not going to be a closed field. We're interested in how complicated things interact with each other, and those things keep interacting, and they keep needing to be studied. And it's a privilege to be able to study them.
Well, I think it's a privilege for Informs to have you so actively involved. So what advice would you give to a first-time attendee? Because it can be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot going on at the show. So what advice would you give a first-time attendee attending Informs Annual?
Well, big conferences in general can use some planning. So looking at the program and picking out some of the things you'd like to listen to in advance is a good idea, so that you can know when they are and not miss them. If you're there in person, it's very nice to meet with friends and colleagues. That's one of the big things about meetings. I'm sorry to be commuting to this one by Zoom, but over time, as you have more friends and colleagues in distant places, it's an opportunity to meet them in person. So that's an important part, and everyone should sit out some talks in order to meet with friends and colleagues over coffee.
Absolutely. So let's have you impart some wisdom here. What's the best and worst advice you've ever received?
So that's a tough one. The best advice I received, probably I was receiving as a graduate student, which is when things don't go well at first, if they're worth doing, keep pushing. Don't get easily discouraged. When I give advice to students, what I tell them is that they have to do a couple of things. They have to find problems that they think are worth studying, that will inspire them to keep going, using tools that they enjoy using, because most days you use your tools and you don't make any progress, but you have to at least be able to come home thinking, well, that was fun. I did some game theory, that's what I like to do. And if you don't enjoy the daily work, you won't be able to work hard enough to accomplish the larger work. So it's important to pick things that are worth doing and that you have fun doing.
It's funny, sitting here, I was reflecting back on some of the best advice I ever received, and it was from a professor in a business class years and years ago at the University of Illinois. And the very first day he stood up and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, without contraries, there will be no progression. Now think about that for a while." And that has been something that has evolved in my head since. It didn't make any sense to me back then, but it certainly has as the years have progressed. So, well, let's talk about a recent project. What recent project have you been involved with most recently that you're most proud of?
Well, I'm currently working, and I've been working for a long time on helping physicians and surgeons organize kidney transplants, and that's a complicated thing, and it lends itself to lots of analytics. But there's also lots of medicine and politics and persuasion that's involved in helping organize how to treat kidney disease through transplantation. And that turns out to be a global problem, and it needs a global solution. And mostly the medical establishment has been looking for solutions strictly within the national boundaries of countries. And that's something that probably will have to change over time. So that's been occupying me quite a bit, both in the very particulars of kidneys and in the more general understanding of which kinds of markets and marketplaces and organizations get social support and which ones don't. So there are lots of larger questions about that, not just, for instance, how we design healthcare systems, but how we think about things like narcotic drugs, which we don't like at all, but prove unable to completely ban. And so just as markets need social support, bans on markets need social support. So I've been thinking about things like that.
It's interesting what you just said. I just finished a couple months ago being the MC for the Nephrology Technicians Conference, and what an amazing group of people, and and great work that you're doing. So thank you for that. So we're sitting here a year from now. Let's flash forward, and we're celebrating. What would we be celebrating with you?
Well, maybe we'll be celebrating that I finished writing a book on repugnant transactions and controversial markets. That's a good near-term goal to celebrate. If I've got that done in a year, it'll only be a year overdue, and that would be a record for me.
Okay. So I want to talk a little personal here about some hobbies, and so talk a bit about this martial arts hobby that you're involved with.
Well, I'm no longer so involved. I now have impaired balance, and balance is very important in martial arts. But when I was in college, I played Shotokan style karate, and then over the years, I've done some other martial arts like judo and aikido, and I always found them very fun to do. I did them with my children as they were growing up. And one thing that's been interesting is how those things have evolved as various kinds of sport competitions have evolved. So there's now this thing called mixed martial arts, where you start to get some empirical evidence about what things work well against other kinds of things. And it turns out that in mixed martial arts, at least, things look a lot more like boxing and like jujitsu than like some of the things that I did. But I didn't do them because I wanted to fight. I did them because I wanted to be healthy and coordinated and well balanced, and it certainly worked well for that, and it caused some great friendships as well.
And what I was always fascinated by martial arts, and having observed several classes, is just the discipline and the respect that also goes along with it. It's just incredible, what goes on in that room. So thank you for sharing that. So let's have a fantasy dinner party. And what famous person from history would you like to have dinner with?
Well, because of my limitations, it should be someone who speaks English. So maybe John von Neumann. He was a real polymath. He died around the time I was born, but he did lots of things. I think he would have enjoyed operations research.
Be a good conversation. So speaking of math, any favorite math joke besides me? What favorite math joke do you have out there?
So I don't have many favorite math jokes. I always like the idea that topologists are people who have trouble deciding whether to dunk their donut into their coffee cup or their coffee cup into their donut.
I like that. So, well, it has been a sheer privilege to speak with you. Thank you for all that you do for Informs, all you do for the world. And I'm excited to have gotten to know you a little bit better. And again, just thank you so much for being part of Informs and the meetings community.
I'm looking forward to the meetings.